Welcome to the High Value Sales Show of Eversprint.com. I'm Malcolm Louie, the managing member of Eversprint, and today we're speaking with Thom McLeod, the founder of Tenzing, a provider of experts with procurement, supply chain, and operations expertise. Welcome to the call, Thom.
Thanks, Malcolm.
Thom, you grew your company's revenue from $4.8 million in 2014 to $9.6 million in 2017, a 98% increase. Before we talk about how you grew your company so fast, can you briefly share what your company does beyond my quick intro and how your company differs from the competition?
Yes, we founded the company actually about 17 years ago with a very simple idea that was a very new idea at the time, which is that some of the best talent out there, even at that time, were independent consultants, independent experts, if you will. And we knew a few of them, and we thought we could start to build a type of consulting off these independent experts. And as we began to build it, the economy started to change too. More and more people became better connected via cell phones, via the web, LinkedIn, and so forth. And we were able to continue to grow this network of experts we had from 25 to 50 to 100. And eventually to 1,000 experts now and growing. We're adding to it every year. These are folks who we carefully recruit, carefully curate in this network, and who are true experts in their fields of endeavor. As you mentioned before, procurement, supply chain operations, but other areas now like IT, finance, marketing, merchandising, and even marketing analytics. So as you build a network of that size, that's also helped us grow the top line of our business, because companies now, rather than choosing a traditional consulting firm, very often want to have much more experience, much more expertise, sometimes in smaller packages, maybe even an individual expert or individual interim executive that can help them analyze a problem, solve the problem, and really execute a sustainable solution. So where does the growth come from? You grow the network, you have more of the experts that your clients need, and they keep coming back for more. So once they understand our model and its differences from traditional consulting, it's a very attractive offering, both in terms of what it can do and what the economic impact of it is.
Now, how does your company differ from the other companies out there that offer expert networks available for companies to tap into?
Well, we certainly do have a focus, right now in these areas of procurement, supply chain, and operations. But I think what's really different is that if you look at other ends of the spectrum, for example, the staff augmentation market is a very different market than ours. Staff augmentation is not necessarily where you go to get experts, it's where you go to get capacity. These are people with similar skills, similar compensation, similar abilities to your employees, but who you simply add to who you currently have to give you more capacity to do work. So, while our company has a certain aspect of it that is staffing, it is not staff augmentation. The folks you would get from Tenzing would be much more senior, much more expert, much higher impact in what they do. The other thing that's different between us and, say, staff augmentation, or for that matter, the other end of the spectrum, pure consulting, true consulting firms, is the fact that we have a much more flexible way of deploying. Most consulting firms have a certain model that they operate with. It's project manager, staff, kind of a pyramid shape. Our teams tend to be smaller, and when they're not smaller, they're very flat. There's no hierarchy on them. And we can deploy these experts in very flexible ways. We can deploy them like a team, or as a team like a consulting firm would. We can also deploy them individually. If you go to most large consulting firms, they don't have a way of deploying a single consultant to solve a problem. Because our experts are so senior and experienced from industry experience, they're also qualified to be interim executives. And many consulting firms don't have the ability to second one of their senior people to a client for a period of time. We do that all the time. So in fact, I just had 2 calls about that this morning, where company realizes that they want to transform a function like procurement, and they think what they need is a new leader. They know it's going to take 6 to 12 months to find a good leader. So an interim executive with experience transforming multiple organizations fits that role perfectly. So, just in summary, we're not doing the low value staff aug. We're doing pure experts. We're not a rigid consulting firm that has a particular way of deploying. We're very flexible. And because we have senior experts, they can be consultants in a manner of speaking, and they can even be interim executives.
Now, is there any commonality between the teams and the work you do, for example? Because it sounds like you said before, I think you said you have over 1,000 experts now that are available. So when a company has a problem, how do you figure out which of the 1,000 are the right ones to bring onto the project?
Well, a couple of different ways. First of all, one of the ways traditional consulting firms are successful is they have standard methodologies and a standard team structure that they like and that's comfortable for them. And they've been successful at simply taking a standard model and giving that to the client with no choice and no modification and getting an okay result. We approach it in a very bespoke way. And involve the client in the process. When we talk to the client, we talk about our capability around the particular issue they have and different ways we can deploy teams. So the client can actually say, I think an interim executive is better here, or I think this is more complex, I need a team. So we and the client co-develop together a solution, I'll call it an expert solution, that will help them make the most progress on a problem. And sometimes, clients, they're careful with their expenditures and they don't want to spend too much money too fast. So we might start with a very small team initially just to get started, understand the situation, and then add more resources as we and the client determine that's needed.
Now, you personally, I imagine, don't know all 1,000 experts or 1,000 plus experts you have in your network right now. So how do you pick a team that you are confident will work well together and get the job done?
Well, lucky for me, I have a team that does this with me. So I'm not the only guy that does it. So when we first got started, my founding partner, Bill, and I, we kind of had to do everything. But gradually, as we grew the network, we also grew our internal team. We have a great team. And really our business now isn't just the sum of all the experts we know. It's also the platform we've created that allows us to recruit, attract, curate that network, staff, engage with all these experts, the 1,000 plus that we now have. So some of the principal functions we have on our internal team are recruiting. We actually go out and recruit more experts. If we don't have something a client needs, we go out and we find it. We have a staffing function, and that is literally the matching of the right expert or experts to the situation. So our staffing team works with a client, and usually there's a partner involved, my partner Bill or me, or one of our other experts. We have some of our experts that really function at a partner level for us. So we'd have an expert who's let's say the practice leader for a food distribution clients. He gets involved with our staffing team and the client to develop the right expert solution, and also to screen and curate his corner of the network. So anyone who's an expert in food production, food distribution, restaurants, goes through this practice leader to get vetted, and he now knows who all those people are. So, from our standpoint, we want to know everyone on our network. And so our team has, in every case, interviewed that person, screened that person, and someone knows that person. We don't just stick people into our database and, hope we call them someday.
Right.
So it's a fairly high touch process.
Right. So of the 1,000 people in your network, how often are they working with you on a Tenzing project that you have with the clients?
Yeah, that's the beautiful thing about this model from a business standpoint. I don't want to say it's Uber for experts, but imagine, if you were to ask that question of Uber, how often are Uber cars driving you around? Not very often, right? But enough for you. So what we found is that the more experts we know, the more options we have for our clients. It gives us the flexibility to have the right person at the right place at the right time. All the experts we work with have other sources of revenue too. They have their own clients. They may work with other firms. So someone in our network may work with us quite a bit. We have some that have worked with us continuously for several years. Some that we may have only worked with once. Some we've screened and curated and brought into our network, and for some reason may never call. So it's highly variable in that regard. But you kind of have to have a big network in order to have all the options that your clients need, and enough depth in every area that you will have someone available when they need it.
Right. Got it. Can you share a bit about your three biggest drivers over the past few years when you grew your business from 4.8 million in 2014 to 9.6 million in 2017? I know you touched a little bit upon about how it's important having a big network, but maybe you can discuss a bit more about what you think were the three biggest drivers.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of word of mouth too. So, in this business, happy clients tell other happy clients, other clients about you. So there is a lot of word of mouth. I would say almost all the business we do today comes, I don't want to say it just walks in the door, but clients come to us looking for something because they heard about us or we've worked with them before and they're calling us again. So what started to happen is what's normally a challenge in a consulting business is you sell projects which have a beginning and end and there's no recurring revenue. But what now has happened is we do have recurring revenue, and here's where that comes from. We work a lot with private equity firms, and we work a lot with other very large consulting firms. So other large consulting firms, and these are some of the largest, best-known consulting firms in the world, are really good at what they do, developing strategy, developing recommendations, but their clients need more. Their clients need help implementing those recommendations. Their clients need execution support, downstream from the consulting projects. Their clients may need an interim executive or an interim leader in some function that consulting firm doesn't provide. So these firms now rely on us to bring us in to those situations. If you think about it, each time they call us, it's a single project, but these are very large firms that work globally and we serve them globally. So they're a continuous source of requests. And it's, I think that's a perpetual motion machine for us. That's going to be a never ending stream of revenue for us, these firms. Similarly, private equity firms. So private equity firms, once they get a feel for your model, get a feel for your reliability, they always have portfolio companies that they're working on. And, most of the ones that we know are always trying to improve in operations, supply chain, and procurement. So we get those calls, on a more or less continuous basis. So I think once we broke out from having to serve one client at a time or earn the right to work with one client at a time and built these longer term streams of revenue, that bumped our growth up considerably.
Right. Okay. So the biggest driver, one is word of mouth, right? You do great work, so clients are referring you, but then maybe the second driver, or maybe you consider them the same. You found an opportunity working with PE firms and very large consulting firms, and they are turning to you for essentially recurring work that they themselves don't have the capability.
Exactly. And I would say a third thing too, which is that when we first founded the company, this idea of going to a firm like Tenzing to get people that were independent was not a comfortable idea. It took a while to get clients comfortable with it, but they are comfortable with it now. So I think the time we were really early on the curve, I believe. And so, I would say in the last 5 years or so, 5 to 10 years, this model has become much more acceptable and much more, comfortable for them to work with. And they come to trust, they trust the processes we put in place to give them a reliable result.
Right. The idea of working with independent consultants and experts is becoming more comfortable with them, as opposed to before they'd work with the big name global firms because it's safer, right? It's like working with IBM.
And, and to a great degree, it is still safer. I mean, those are much larger firms than we are for sure. But, we're finding our place in the market. And like I said, I think it's a real vindication of our model that You asked who our competition is. I would say large consulting firms, but the reality is we're not competitors in many respects. They respect us, and they're our partners, right? So they see the value of what we do.
Yeah, it's quite interesting, right? You both might compete on some projects, but then you also work together on others, right?
Yeah, so, exactly. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, not too different from, say, like contracting with the government, right? They might lose the contract, but then they become a subcontractor to those who win.
Yeah, I've heard that happens. I don't do a lot of work with the government. I don't know. It may happen that way.
Yeah. Okay. So just to recap the three biggest drivers. One, you do great work, so your happy customers are keen to do more business with you or refer other opportunities to you. You identified an opportunity of getting recurring business by working with the large consulting firms and PE firms. And then the third one is you were just the right company at the right time, and you benefited from the general acceptance of working with smaller, independent expert networks and consultant firms.
Yeah, and on that third point, there's a general acceptance of the idea, so people don't, slam the door in your face, when they first understand it. But there's this specific acceptance of our model that it produces, high quality recruiting of experts and people that are well vetted and checked out. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Nobody wants to think you just went out on the street and grabbed a guy and here's some guy that I know. So, they trust the process and the platform that we've created.
Right. Got it. Can you share a bit about what your plans are to grow your business further in 2019?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's a lot of interesting things that are kind of percolating right now in the marketplace. And, I'll talk about sort of general things that we're doing to keep growing and some more specific, interesting ideas that are just really in their infancy. Because we have this platform now, so we can, even though our heritage is procurement, supply chain, and operations, the platform doesn't really care what kinds of experts are in it. So the idea right now is to say, let's take the platform and build expert practices in other discipline areas. I mentioned finance before. We've built a kind of a proto expert network in finance, in IT. We're now looking more carefully at areas like data analytics, as an example. A lot of clients want, deep analytical solutions for various kinds of problems, especially in supply chains, as an example. So we're looking at building practices now on this platform that are adjacent to the ones that we currently have. Some of the other things we're doing, obviously, the large consulting firms and private equity firms, we've only begun to scratch the surface there, and you can see the kind of growth spurt that that has given us. But I think the more of those firms we touch, get to know, and get to work with, I think that'll continue to fuel our growth. The other couple of interesting technology areas are emerging now that we want to explore and possibly take advantage of that relate to our business. So the ability to quickly find the right people is something that's for us very much of a human process right now. We have to know how to do recruiting. We have to know what the right person looks like on LinkedIn or in a resume. We have to know how to screen them and how to interview them and how to understand them better. But there's technology out there now, AI technology, bots, machine learning that can help us do that more quickly. Companies like ZipRecruiter do this now. And so we're thinking about, can we take a technology like that and apply it to the independent expert market so that when we put a search out for an expert we don't have, it quickly feeds us back the right candidates, a small group of the right candidates, versus us sifting through 100. Another thing, we had a call about this morning, interestingly, when you think about blockchain as a way of authenticating and certifying, any object or asset. Could you use blockchain as a way to certify the credentials and capabilities of an expert? Would that make the quality and the trust that people have in our network even better? So these are some things that are kind of leading edge ideas I don't think a lot of people are thinking about right now.
Right. What do you foresee as the biggest challenge that you need to figure out and overcome in 2019?
Oh, wow. Just in this year. there's always big challenges every year. I mean, I think everything I just said is really, that's our growth strategy, and each of those strategies is challenging. How do you earn the right to work with more consulting firms? They tend to think that they're pretty good at what they do. So why would they want to work with another firm? If they perceive you as a competitor, they're not going to want to do that. But we are, even within the relationships we have, they are starting to open up quite a bit. But it's a challenge to work your way through the culture of a consulting firm and earn the right to be a partner with them. Even if some of the guys in that firm really like working with you, there could be other partners that are very skeptical. And, most partnerships, they let the partners make their own decisions about things. So you got to win every heart and mind individually. So that's always going to be a challenge. In private equity, whenever we get into a private equity firm, we do pretty well. I mean, they become a really long-term client, but there's so many private equity firms, it's almost impossible to get to all of them. So the challenge of figuring out which ones we're going to work with, which ones we can get to and serve, I think is going to be difficult. And then I'd say, I think a real challenge, these other technology areas are not going to be, drop-in kind of solutions. I think we're going to have to work pretty hard to figure out, how that technology might work and how to deploy it. I don't really know yet what kinds of people and monetary investments they may entail, but I think they have the potential to really turbocharge the business.
Yeah, definitely. That's the thing now. So many of the people I've spoken with talk about the impact that AI could potentially have in their business.
Right.
Can you share with me a bit more about what you're doing now to find the big consultant firms to work with and the PE shops to work with?
Yeah, it's not a very exciting story. I mean, it's just kind of retail, retail marketing, really. I mean, when you look in private equity world, private equity firms, unlike other industries, don't really compete with one another. They're very collegial. So in the private equity community, if you know one person in that community, they usually know a lot of the other guys in that community because they often work on deals together. So I think it's networking in private equity is the best way to get there. So we don't cold call anybody. We don't, we don't show up at their office and try to get a meeting. It's always warm introductions, one person who knows and trusts us, introducing us to another person that they know and trust. And that's a slow process. It's a slow process. And it's hard to do kind of a big splash marketing in private equity space because they're not looking at the kinds of marketing tools you normally would. They're not looking on LinkedIn to hear about companies. They're not looking at advertising. So it's literally meeting individual people one at a time and working your way around. It's similar, I think with the consulting firms as well. So those are two things we're still focusing a lot this year in terms of growth. One of the other things we're doing from a marketing standpoint is we're starting to take some of the IP, some of the knowledge and expertise that our experts have and publishing it. So they may not have the wherewithal or the inclination to write a very, lucid white paper on a particular topic, but we have writers that can do that. And we'll interview experts, sometimes individual experts or maybe a panel of experts, and we'll take their knowledge and expertise and put it into an ebook. That ebook we can then publish on our website. We can publish it on LinkedIn. We can tell people about it. We can, share and comment on it ourselves, and that helps perpetuate our messages across all of our individual networks. And that's starting to produce some results. We just recently published an ebook on MRO, maintenance, repair, and operations supplies, which is a very, complex, frustrating category of material to procure in most companies. And we had a lot of downloads. We did a WebEx that was co-sponsored by Scout RFP that had 400 attendees, I think 400 attendees. And that got a lot of looks, let's just say, and a lot of people downloaded it, and we could follow up with them. And it's already produced a couple of leads that were in final discussions, even proposals with clients on. So that's starting to kick in as well.
Fantastic. Fantastic. It's always good to see marketing efforts generate results for you.
Yep.
So, for now, just to clarify, you didn't go too deep into this. You did share how you go about making contact and engaging new PE firms to do business with you. You said the consulting firms is a similar process, but then at the same time, I thought consulting might be a bit less collegial than the PE firms, given that they might be competing for same projects.
It can be. It can be because we serve individual firms that compete with each other. So we have to be very careful about, if one firm calls us into a competitive situation, that we're not, getting called by another firm that's competing with them. We can't serve both of them. So we have to do some deconfliction there. But it's a little different with consulting firms because, every PE firm wants to improve their portfolio companies, right? Mm-hmm. I'd say almost every PE firm, but, probably everyone does seek outside experts to help them with that, whether it's firms or individuals that they know. Not every consulting firm partners with other consulting firms. So the first discussion, we would have, would be with the highest level partner in a firm who we may know. It might be a friend or a colleague we worked with long ago, just to find out if they're open to the discussion. And once they are, it's a long series of discussions about how we work, how we could work, getting more partners on board. There's very little, very little opportunity to get one or two executives bought into something at a consulting firm and have everybody do it. It's pretty much every partner gets to make their own decision. So,
right.
I don't want to put too much emphasis on that. There's a lot more we do besides private equity and other consulting firms because we have a lot of our own clients too. So, more of our traditional referrals and following up with, with former clients is still a big part of where our business comes from.
What percentage of your business do you think comes from referrals from existing clients as opposed to those that are coming from your consulting and PE work?
It's probably 50%.
Okay. Yeah, I actually spoke with another company, very interesting, and they have a similar strategy. And what they do is that they provide building intelligence services. And they decided that they're going to target the largest real estate investment trusts in the nation, right? Because they don't just have one building, they have hundreds of buildings, right? And each of their buildings are enormous.
Right.
And similar to you, they know that if they can get in and start doing great work for one building, it's likely that they will be on the short list for any other building that needs building intelligence, right? So, when you shared your strategy at the PE firms and the consultant shops, I'm thinking, wow, this is fantastic. This is a very interesting model that you're targeting. For your referrals from your existing customers, your existing clients, are you proactive in getting the referrals?
Yeah. In most cases, we're asking a happy client, obviously, if they're willing to be a reference, and if they have any referrals, and we'll always act on those.
Okay, great. Do you have is it pretty casual and pretty unstructured, or do you have a plan in place, 6 months after we're working with clients who have rated us well on our various metrics, then we ask them?
It could be a bit more structured than it is, I would say. It's a habit I would say we have, but I wouldn't say it's a real process.
Right. Okay, good. 3 final questions for you. Say you were to have a billboard talking about Tenzing's services. What would be your billboard message? And keep in mind that people on a freeway that's zipping by a billboard, they only have about 6 seconds to read your billboard. So what would be your message?
Got it. I would say experts matter. Might be it.
Experts matter. Okay.
Yeah, I would share a couple of other interesting things to you as well. If it's one of those things that sort of kind of can turn your mind, on these issues. I've seen estimates recently that there's roughly 40% of the workforce today that freelances. Now, a lot of freelancing is done in the IT area, graphics, creative. But increasingly, as we're finding, freelancing is something that professionals do in more corporate type roles, right? The kind of roles that our people do. So when you think about any company that's out there hiring people and running their talent strategy in a traditional way, they may be ignoring 40% of the workforce available to them. So, if you think about another billboard could be, you're ignoring 40% of the workforce in your company.
Right.
And, if someone's willing to go like, wait a second, I am, let's have a conversation about that. Right.
Yeah.
So, because we're after the 40% freelancers out there that are really talented. They're very good at what they do. But no one's looking at them unless we find work for them. The second thing I found startling is I was back to the conversation about, talking to other consulting firms. I was talking to the CEO of a major consulting firm recently, had dinner with him. And, I was describing our company and he said, it's interesting, Tom, because I just had, my HR people, and he's got several thousand people in his organization, tens of thousands actually. Go tell me what the average age of our consultants is. And he said 26. So think about that for a minute. Companies that go to traditional consulting firms are tapping a pool of, by the way, brilliant, hardworking people who are mostly under 30. And I'd say, age isn't the only thing that matters in life, but experience does. So someone who's got 15, 20, 30 years of real experience doing something is really valuable. And yet in consulting firms, by the time you have that many years of experience, you're either a partner that's not serving clients or you're retired.
Right. Or you went into the corporate world.
Right. You might have. Right.
Yeah. So.
Exactly. So, it kind of, I can imagine a lot of creative advertising I could do with some of that.
Yeah, definitely.
Maybe I should. You inspired me.
Well, another one, I'll give you some other inspiration. Early on in our conversation, you almost said we're like the Uber for experts, but not quite. What about Uber for experts doesn't quite fit well with you?
Well, I didn't want to get the idea that there's roving experts out there waiting for work, like circling the block waiting to show up. But, it is the idea that you have assets. I mean, it's the idea that you have assets, and we have people who are human assets, obviously. You have assets that are underutilized. And if people can have access to those assets as needed, you actually get better asset utilization. I think there's a lot of studies that show that when you have an Uber system, you need fewer vehicles to serve the public than if you have a taxi system.
Right.
It's just more efficient. The other thing is, and again, it's what I'd like to distinguish in our business versus Uber. We're really like Uber Black, okay, or Uber Premium in the sense that our experts are heavily vetted, they're heavily certified. Whereas, there's the low end of the Uber spectrum where the quality of the drivers, the quality of the cars is, can be a little suspect.
Yeah.
We don't operate at that end of the spectrum, okay, at all. Right. So that's some of the distinctions I like to make before people think of us as Uber. It's not exactly the same, but some of the principles apply.
Yeah, and it has a nice ring to it, right? If you said you provide an Uber-like platform for experts, I think everyone would immediately get that right off the bat.
Yeah, and part of my qualification is I don't want them to get the bad part of that.
Yeah, true.
We don't deal with that we don't deal with that lower end of the market at all. So
yeah, I totally hear you.
It's a premium service. It's high quality. It's very heavily curated.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting that your use of the word curated. I've never heard of curation being applied to people and their skills, but I mean, I can see that's exactly what you're doing.
Yeah, we're actually contemplating, it's already evolving this way. We're contemplating roles. We might even call them curators, but if we don't call them curators, that'll be their function. So I talked about, our leader of our food practice. So I'm not an expert in the food industry, but he is. He knows what good looks like. He knows what the skills are that they would need to serve a client in that industry. So I want him to curate that network. I want him to hire the kind of people he thinks his clients are going to need. I want him to recruit, and screen people and put them in the right skill buckets. You know what I mean?
Yep.
That work, for him. And then over time, keep that going, keep that alive, keep it evergreen, stay in touch with those people. So like you asked me before, you can't possibly know all 1,000 people. Well, I don't. But as long as someone I trust on my team knows that person, I'm fine.
Right. Is there a certain size of your network where you think this model might not work? Like if it's 10,000 experts, right? You're going to have multiple layers of curating experts, right? You're going to have curators who are curating the curator.
That's a really good question. I hope I have that problem someday. But the thing that we're trying to be careful of is we don't want to just grow a giant network just to have a giant network, right? We have to have the demand. We have to have clients that are taking full advantage of it. So you're right. If you just had a big network and you just added the cost of more curation to make a better network, but you never could fully exploit that on the top line of your business, you just be spending a lot of money for nothing. So I think what we've achieved, and it shows in our profitability, is the fact that we've grown the network and we've grown our revenue at the same time. So, I do believe that there's really no limit to the size of the network if you follow the same principles and processes that we have, as long as you're making good use of it. The other thing that I've had some just very preliminary discussions with clients who are starting to think about expert networks as a function within their company, not necessarily our expert network, but because we're now experts in experts, that's what I kind of think of us as sometimes. I think we could really help a company figure out how to create a curated network for themselves. It would have nothing to do with what our procurement, supply chain, or operations expertise is. It might be in an entirely different area, but we know how to do it. And that capability is something I think a lot of companies are starting to think about.
I can imagine this could be especially useful in a huge company, right? The IBMs of the world that have tens of thousands of experts within their ranks, but right. People don't even know about them, right?
Right, exactly right.
Way for them to find each other.
Well, think of it this way too. I mean, where I'm seeing some of that interest developing is in the innovation parts of companies. So the parts of companies where they're trying to create new businesses. What happens when you're creating a new business? Very often, it's a business that isn't the business you're in today, and so you don't have the experts in that business today. And before you go hire, 1,000 people for a little startup company within your company, wouldn't it be cool if you could tap experts outside the lanes of of expertise that you have now to help scale that company up as you create this new innovation and you try to grow it? So you can use networks, I think, flexible networks, curated networks, to bring in skills you don't have today, scale up a business, and then you can hire the people you need over time, that have the right expertise.
Yeah, makes sense. It's a way of ramping up business without making the commitment of hiring people.
Absolutely.
So yeah, very cool. And if you
more than not making the hiring commitment, it's saying I can more quickly get the skills I need through a vibrant network than I could if I have to hire them.
Yeah, definitely.
It takes a lot longer to hire people, especially in a corporate environment.
Yeah, and I think you can also make changes more quickly as well, right? If you
Absolutely. Unhiring too is much easier.
So fantastic. Can you recap again who your ideal clients are? And I think there are maybe three that you can go into if you wish. Your companies you consult with directly, and the PE firms you like to work with, and the consultant firms you like to work with.
Yeah, I would say, any company that is undergoing significant change, either broad-based change or change within functions, especially our core functions, that really needs outside help and wants an alternative to traditional consulting would be an ideal client for us. Very often they're calling traditional consulting firms because they don't know who else to call, even though they wish they didn't have to call them. So we're just a fresh alternative to that. So if you're thinking about calling a major consulting firm for any kind of an operational issue, you should at least take a look at our model and what we can do as an alternative to that. I would definitely say private equity firms, are in that category, but they're sort of special in that category to us because our model allows us to create very impactful, sustainable change on a much smaller scale than most large consulting firms do. So a lot of PE firms are buying smaller companies, $100 million, $500 million companies. And those companies can't afford or absorb large, expensive consulting teams. But our very tight, lean, flat expert teams are just the perfect fit for that environment. I'd also say on this last point, companies that are seriously thinking about building their own curated expert networks as a business model within their companies are definitely companies we should talk to, because I think we have a lot to share in how one builds these networks, how you manage them, and how you deploy them, even outside our areas of expertise. So I would definitely say those are companies we would love to talk to, and share what we've learned, because it's been a long journey, but it's one where we've learned a lot. And I think we've solved a lot of the problems that they would have to solve to be successful at this.
How would you find a company that's interested in building their own in-house expert network?
I tell you what, if you talk to anybody that knows, I'd be really curious. I don't know how to know that about a company. Mm-hmm. I've had some people that know our business introduce me to companies that were thinking of it, but it's not something people post on their websites. It's like, hey, we're trying to figure out how to have expert networks, right? It's a fairly new idea. I don't think too many companies are even really know where to begin the thinking process. I wish I did know. Maybe you could find out for me, Malcolm.
Yeah, maybe I can.
Yeah.
How about on the PE firm and consulting side? Who are your ideal partners that you like to engage and work with?
Well, we work with all the, every size of PE firm basically. So everything from the really big ones, and I can name some of the ones we've worked with. KKR, we've worked with TPG, Bain Capital. And then the vast majority of PE firms are really in the mid-cap space, where they're buying smaller companies. And, those are, as it turns out, they're probably more in our sweet spot, or maybe we're more in their sweet spot than the larger ones. The larger PE firms are still comfortable with, and many of their companies can afford to go to major consulting firms. But the mid-cap firms really they struggle with the cost of a traditional consulting firm and the model of people who really aren't experts, the 26-year-olds, if you will.
Right.
So those are kind of the ones we're targeting primarily.
Okay. And for the consulting side, for anyone who's listening out there, would you like to qualify or mention which sort of consulting firms you'd be happy to have a conversation with to see how you can help?
Well, actually, because we work with several of them, I don't want to name any.
Okay. No
if I name ones we wish we were working with, you'd probably figure out which ones we were. So I'm not going to name them, but I think if I was making a general appeal to any large consulting firm, that as you look at your capability, if you realize that you do have, a very, young teams are very capable, but your clients just need more. They need something different. They need that senior expert that can execute and work on a problem for much longer periods of time, 12, 18 months even. Yeah. We're a partner that can do that. And right. Many consulting firms are already looking into it. They're trying to do it internally. And some of the ones that are working with us are just realizing they can't do it internally. They've kind of given up on trying to manage these networks, and they see us as a viable alternative.
Right. Does it make sense to but to maybe focus more on the consulting firms that are strategy oriented? Because you mentioned before, right, the ones that do strategy, oftentimes their clients want help with implementation, right? And then it'd be natural to have them bring you in to help with the implementation side of things.
Yeah, that is a kind of a logical, conclusion. So right. I won't say much more than that. But.
Okay, fair enough. All right, and what's the best way for all those companies to contact you if they'd like to learn more about how you can help them?
Well, one way to learn is go to our website, which is tenzingconsulting.com. And the other way is to contact me directly over LinkedIn, for example. Thom McLeod. And I'm on there, and I'd be happy to take an email from anybody, or you can send an email, a regular email to me at tmcleod@tenzingconsulting.com.
Would you like to spell out Tenzing for those who are listening and not
Sure.
reading the interview?
Absolutely. Tenzing. Tenzing.
Great. And maybe share how you spell your last name, because it's, at least for me, it's a little bit different.
Sure. It's McLeod. By the way, I should also spell my first name.
Oh, yeah.
That's a little different too.
Yeah. Why don't you do it again, because I spoke over you a little bit.
Oh, sure. So my name is spelled ThomMcleod. Thom McLeod. I'm on LinkedIn. And you can also get to me through our website, tenzingconsulting.com.
All right, fantastic. Thanks for joining us today, Thom, and sharing how you accelerated your company's high-value sales.
Thank you, Malcolm. I appreciate the chance to share the story.
Yeah, it's a great story. It's really interesting how you're in a way disrupting how consultants provide services to companies, which is very cool.
It's been fun.
We've been speaking with Thom McLeod, the founder of Tenzing, about his company's rapid growth. For interviews with other fast-growing, high-value sales companies, or to learn how we can accelerate your firm's high-value sales through automation, visit eversprint.com.